On Sunday, she didn't answer us, and neither on Monday.
The only communication that they had seemingly from her was by text message.
When details started to appear of what had actually happened, it causes a lot of concern, a lot of fear as well.
You could surmise that she'd been strangled or that the cord had actually caused her death.
A lot of the neighbours would have been shocked, but also extremely puzzled as to how this could have happened.
We were suspicious about the lies. It's big lies, you know.
I live every day with the fact that I was friends with a murderer.
At the edge of London lies the village-like suburb of Kew.
Kew is one of the most sought-after areas of London. It's in West London.
Kew is an extremely wealthy area. It's within commuting distance of the City of London, and it's wonderful nature beside the river and the Royal Botanic Gardens.
It's very leafy, it's a very well-to-do kind of area. It's fairly low crime as well. So it's a nice area for people to live in.
There is definitely a villagey feel. We have a very small high street. You will find a lot of independent trades around Kew, which I think that's what people like.
There's a lot of artists and TV celebrities, and of course Sir David Attenborough lives there. It's a world-class site.
Kew was the perfect place for aspiring French filmmaker Laureline Garcia-Bateau to set up home in 2009.
Laureline was my best friend, my close friend. She was like a sister to me. We always be united. We always be in touch. We just developed a friendship, more than a friendship. Our children called her Auntie Lolo, and my daughter has her name. She was family.
She was a vivacious, very popular, well-liked young woman who was beautiful on the inside as well as on the outside. She was easy to like and was a very caring and considerate kind of person.
The future seemed bright for Laureline, and London was the place to help make her career ambitions come true.
She was born in Aix-en-Provence, but she came to London to pursue her dream of becoming a film producer.
Laureline had a lot of passion, but she developed a real passion for cinema. She was a passionate people. She was a determined people. She was a hard worker. She started her own production company. She got a Grammy as a production assistant on a movie with Dame Joan Collins. For us, it was nice and amazing, but I know for England was a dream, and it was a dream.
Despite a successful career, Laureline was happiest at home with her dogs.
Laureline was a dog lover. She loves animals. She had an Instagram of a video every day with her two dogs, Haley, a husky, and Blake, a Rottweiler. Okay, so nice. They sleep on the bed, and we see that on Instagram every day. It's like they're her children for her.
And on top of her busy life in the UK, Laureline stayed in regular contact with her family in France.
Laureline was very close to her family. Oh yes, she used to call her mom every day and maybe twice a day, on the morning and the evening. So the family for Laureline is everything. Family and friends and pets was everything.
In March 2019, Laureline was due to move out of her flat in Kew into a new place. Something friends and family were eagerly waiting to hear about.
On Sunday, she didn't answer us, neither on Monday, and it was already strange.
Certainly raised alarm bells the fact that Laureline had not spoken to her best friend and her mum and her family when she would normally speak to her mum every day and speak to her best friend very regularly as well. So the only communication that they had seemingly from her was by text message.
But there was something unusual about Laureline's texts.
Her friends had received some strange text messages from her that didn't really chime with the kind of person that they knew her to be. For example, her best friend said that she thought it was strange that she said that she was going on a shopping spree in Oxford Street because she knew that she usually shopped online and got all her clothes from online retailers. She described how she was looking forward to getting a boob job and liposuction. Certainly not the kind of thing that she would have said. So this kind of thing immediately raised alarms, and they were very, very concerned that she just seemed to be communicating by text message, but nobody had seen her.
Confused by Laureline's strange behaviour, her sister-in-law makes her way to the property in Kew.
And when she couldn't find her, she alerted the police.
Laureline was reported missing on the 6th of March 2019, and that means that a police officer would be dispatched to talk to her about her concerns and take a report. The missing persons inquiry started with questions to her sister-in-law and potentially any friends that could be found to say, have you seen her? Can you tell us when you last saw her? And the concern was raised because her sister-in-law had visited the address and she could hear dogs barking, Laureline's dogs, and no sign of Laureline. Laureline was a lover of dogs, so she would never leave her dogs alone. They were her children, essentially, at the time. And also, because it was now Tuesday, Laureline had failed to turn up for work, so work colleagues were now concerned. So you had a lot of people voicing their concern about where Laureline was, and that made it a concern for the police because this was completely out of character and completely unusual behaviour.
Police begin their inquiries by also visiting Laureline's address.
In a missing persons inquiry, police will attend an address, the place where a person lives, because within that premises you might find something to indicate where they've gone. It might be a ticket, it might be a receipt, it could be anything. And also you want to make sure that they haven't come to harm behind locked doors. So there would be a natural instinct for officers to get into that premises, and quite often that's by breaking in to check on the welfare of somebody, and that's what they did in this case. The officers went in, searched the premises, and she was not anywhere. But what officers could see inside that address was the boxes all still ready to be packed.
It looked as if she was just about to move out. Her belongings were all boxed up, ready as if she was about to move out of the flat straight away. So it looked like the home had been disrupted in some way.
Back at the police station, officers assess the risk of Laureline's disappearance.
A missing person is graded low, medium or high risk, and different things happen at different levels. In the low risk, you've got people who perhaps there's no particular harm, but you can think they might just have gone away, and the concern is quite a low for them. Medium risk, slightly more work is done around that because people are concerned, but it might be within their character to go away for a weekend or something like that. So it's not necessarily out of character. Whereas you have the high risk category, and that's where Laureline sat, because this was completely out of character.
After reviewing the case as high risk, police returned to Laureline's address for a more detailed search.
They went out into the garden using torches. And in the garden, they had a look around and they could see various items leaning up against a fence, so a spade, shovel, other items that you would use in general gardening, and a bag of compost as well on the right-hand fence. And one of the officers then turned attention to the flower bed on the left-hand side as you walked into the garden and noticed that it was completely brand new in one section. The CID officer moved the soil back closest to them and identified what they thought was the shape of a foot sticking out in essentially a shallow grave. And just a few more scrapes to see what was there made them believe that what they had found was indeed a body.
Police searching for missing French filmmaker Laureline Garcia-Berteau have discovered a body buried in her back garden.
As soon as you find a body in a shallow grave in a premises, it becomes a murder inquiry straight away because that person doesn't put themselves there. And that's when the process of the team start to make their own inquiries, and all the different actions that come out of that initial deployment begin in earnest.
With a murder investigation in progress, police secure the scene.
We had a lot of this area all cordoned off, a lot of crime scene tents here, because as you bring items out of the garden as well, you need to put them somewhere which is forensically sterile. And so we try to utilise the area out the back of the premises for that reason. So here really behind the house, the alleyway that we used, and trying to set up a forensic retrieval here was quite difficult because the wind was so strong that it was hard. And obviously knowing how detailed you've got to be and how to avoid any contamination because it is windy, and also you're dealing with an outside scene, it's particularly more complex than you would expect an inner scene to be.
Arrive on scene, having been called by the homicide assessment team, usually, and we'll receive a briefing from the local borough police about what the incident involves and why it may be suspicious. Once we've had a briefing, we'll be wearing protective clothing, mask, overshoes, gloves, scene suit, and entering the scene to look for to see what has occurred.
The crime scene manager is in charge of that scene forensically, whether they be physical exhibits that are taken out of a premises or whether they are swabs or fingerprints. They're in charge of running that scene.
The recovery of the body is totally down to the archaeologist, and he'll work in tandem with an anthropologist. Their speciality is bone analysis, who died, how they died and where they died. Working together, they can rapidly maximise the recording, interpretation and recovery of the body.
As the team removes several inches of soil, it becomes clear that the individual is in fact female.
Obviously, your first thought is, well, Laureline Garcia-Berteau is missing, and we have a body in the garden, and it's suspicious that she's missing. So, obviously, my thought is straight away, well, this is probably going to be Laureline. But you don't go to a family with probablys. You have to be sure.
As forensic archaeologists continue digging, the level of brutality on the victim becomes clear.
Once the body was removed from the ground, she was lying on her back, naked. She was wrapped in a mattress, and there was silver duct tape around the area of where the knees and the neck were. The mattress was then wrapped in a cord around the middle of it, but around her neck she had an electric wire. She had a head bag on, and her arms were tied behind her back with duct tape. You could surmise that she'd been strangled or the cord had actually caused her death. You couldn't see the rest of the body to determine what else was there. She may have been stabbed for all we know, but that wouldn't be able to be looked at until it got to the mortuary.
As the body is taken to the mortuary to establish a cause of death and identify the victim, news of a murder spreads.
For a young woman's body to be dug up in a garden in Kew, it would have been, almost unheard of in a neighbourhood like that. A lot of the neighbours would have been shocked, but also extremely puzzled as to how this could have happened.
I haven't ever heard of a murder in Kew.
It's quite shocking to hear a murder in Kew. It's not normally the norms of anything.
When details started to appear of what had happened, people become very concerned about, something that's happening in your neighbourhood. It causes a lot of concern, a lot of fear as well.
At the mortuary, the post-mortem gets underway.
Once the body arrives for the post-mortem, he would look at both sides of the body for any bruising, any wounds, anything that stands out to him. There was no obvious bruising around the neck, but once you get the body opened up and get under the skin, then the bruising can be seen. Be checking the hyoid bone, the bone under the neck, see if it's fractured, and then it results in the conclusion that death had been compression of the neck, believed via strangulation.
With a cause of death established, it isn't long before the individual is identified as none other than Laureline Garcia-Berteau.
I was in my car alone, and I just remember that it was Laureline's mother I had on phone. So I just say the word, is it her? Is she dead? And I hung up. I remember I screamed. I never screamed like that. It's taken a part of me. She was like my little sister, It's taken a part of me.
The investigation into Laureline's murder ramps up and initial theories are considered. Could this be a burglary gone wrong?
It's a very attractive area for a burglar because there's a lot of assets there.
So if someone's forced their way into the address and killed somebody, and then that person has disappeared, we need to identify them as soon as we can. So we'll be looking to make a light source examination, any finger marks that are not seen to the naked eye. Fingerprint examination. We'll be looking for any DNA that we can find, possibly cigarette ends. Things have been moved by the suspect. He may have opened drawers, cupboards, so we'll be looking to examine those, DNA. He may have cut himself somewhere, so he may have drops of blood that he's left behind.
But a closer examination begins to cast doubts on a suspected burglary.
If it had been a burglary gone wrong, you wouldn't expect them to hang around and attempt to hide the body in the way that it had been.
Police take into consideration Laureline's plans to move home around the time of her murder.
Could the movers have been involved? Could it have been a handyman that had, come round and helped box up her belongings?
After making their inquiries, police discovered that no removal firm had attended the address. So focus switches to Laureline's personal life.
Certainly from her communication with her friends, it was suggested that when she'd last spoken to her sister-in-law, she was looking forward to going on a date with a vet that she'd met. But it was very unclear whether that date had actually taken place or who he was even. There was very little information given. Who had she been talking to online, on dating apps? Maybe she met somebody else. That was certainly something that could be unravelled through looking into her mobile phone and computer.
Police decide to try to look into Laureline's last movements to see if they hold any clues.
You look at things like Laureline's finance, so where has she spent money, which indicates that she might have been to a certain place, like a restaurant, which we found out on Friday the 1st, she'd been to a restaurant, and then that venue itself has CCTV.
The CCTV shows Laureline dining with a man, with the pair holding hands. And inquiries with those closest to Laureline soon identifies him.
Laureline was in an on-off relationship for quite a number of years with a man called Kirill Belarusov. And this relationship had been going on for 8+ years, but had kind of fizzled out a couple of years beforehand, but they still saw each other on and off. And so they were aware that Kirill was in the UK as an Estonian national, in the UK to come and help her move that weekend.
Police continue to scour CCTV around the area. Both are later seen on bus CCTV, heading in the direction towards Laureline's home in Kew. It seems Kirill may have been one of the last people to see Laureline alive. But when police try to locate him, they find they are too late.
They had discovered that Kirill was actually no longer in the UK. He had flown to Tallinn in Estonia.
Belarusov has left the country.
Police investigating the murder of Laureline Garcia Berteau want to speak to her ex-lover, Kirill Belarusov, as he may have been one of the last people to see her. But police discover that he has left the country.
The CID officers got in contact with Kirill Belarusov via a telephone number they had for him, which was given to them by the family. And they made contact straight away. He behaved like he didn't know what had happened, and the last time he saw her, she was alive.
Kirill tells police he was helping Laureline move on the Saturday, before she left Kew to move to a new address. But when asked further about this last encounter with Laureline, he doesn't give clear answers.
He was being obstructive, in our opinion. He kept avoiding the question. I wanted him back in the country because I wanted to speak to him face to face, but he kept making excuses why he wasn't coming back, or saying, yes, I'm just going to sort it out, and then nothing would happen. He could do everything he could to come back. He was saying he'd be back on one day, that day would go past, we'd ring him and he'd say, I couldn't make it, I'm going to do another day, and this just kept pushing back and pushing back. And you get to a point where you think, well, that's enough. I know he's trying to avoid him coming back.
I think the fact that Belarusov is not keen to help the police in their inquiries, considering that Laureline had been his partner for the best part of 10 years, is extremely suspicious. And the fact that he left the country around the time of her disappearance as well would have raised alarm bells.
Kirill Belarusov soon became the #1 suspect in the inquiry.
But with Kirill refusing to come back, police need to apply for an extradition order.
The police have a fairly complicated process to get someone back from another country. The British police can apply for a European arrest warrant, which is what they did. So they applied to get Belarusov back from Estonia, where he was at the time.
But for the Crown Prosecution Service to agree, the police need to prove they have enough of a case against Kirill.
When you get a European arrest warrant, as this was, when you bring them back into the country, you have no power to interview them. So you have to do everything without asking them a question, which is very, very difficult because you're not giving, firstly, someone the ability to explain, but also you have to reach that threshold of evidence, which means that as soon as they set foot back in this country, you can charge them straight away with the murder.
With police needing to build a firm case against Kirill, they start to dig into his life.
I met Kirill whilst working in a nightclub. It was called Egg, and we started working together, and that's how we met. Kirill was very charming. He was very nice. He was not, arrogant or trying to tell his side of the story. He was always waiting for you to ask a question before bragging or saying anything. Kirill told me about Laureline when we met. He didn't say her name, but he mentioned that he had an ex-girlfriend that he was really in love with, and that they broke up.
But Sabrina recalls how Kirill later spoke in more detail about his and Laureline's relationship and claimed she had cheated on him.
He mentioned that he'd had cancer before and that he couldn't have babies anymore, and that one time his ex fell pregnant and she didn't know that he couldn't have babies, and that's how he found out that she cheated, and that's how the relationship ended. He would always say that it was his fault and that she was very caring and that it was hard on her, the fact that he had cancer. So he wasn't blaming her, but he was saying that's how they ended it.
Sabrina remembers the last time she saw Kirill before he left the UK for his home country of Estonia.
The last time I saw Kirill, he told me before that he was going to die, that his cancer was terminal, and that was the last time I was ever going to see him. He said he sold his house, I'm about to die, let's go dinner. And I went to that restaurant crying. I cried most of the night saying, I'm going to lose my friends.
With police still unable to question Kirill to see if his account of his illness is true, they turn to Laureline's finances to try to establish her whereabouts the weekend of her murder.
Through continued interrogation of finances, we see that on Saturday, round about 10:15 in the morning, that there are transactions in Pets at Home and Sainsbury's, all local to where Laureline lived. So again, officers are there as quickly as possible to identify CCTV opportunities. And there you see Kirill Belarusov with Laureline again. So now we know he's with her in the morning.
At a glance, all appears to be fine. But when police look at Laureline's finances a day later on the Sunday, there appears to be no sign of any purchases. Instead, they look into Kirill's finances.
So we start to look at transactions that Kirill might have made as well. And what you could see on Sunday the 3rd of March was Kirill had left premises and had gone to a local retail park, similar to where Laureline and he had been the day before. He'd been to Sainsbury's, been to Homebase, and been to convenience stores through that morning, and was purchasing items which were highly suspicious. They were the rubble sacks that matched the rubble sacks that were found on Laureline's body. He had purchased an axe, which we never found, and he had purchased soil or compost, as it was. And you could see the CCTV of him, identifying him clearly as the person purchasing those items. And so you could say straight away then that it's very, very clear what he was up to. That was now that Laureline had been killed and he was thinking of ways to dispose of her body.
With Kirill's behaviour raising suspicions, police approached the CPS.
We had to go to the Crown Prosecution Service and prove what we had, using all of the information we had: CCTV, finance, witness statements, the crime scene itself, the condition of Laureline's body. And that was something which is very, very difficult, but we were able to prove at that point that we had enough evidence to secure an arrest of Kirill Belarusov. And that gives you the ability to get a European arrest warrant and bring them back. He was brought back on the 20th of March and charged with the murder of Laureline. Kirill Belarusov will go to court the following day, to a magistrate's court, where, because it's murder, they send it to the Crown Court, and then he's due to enter a plea some 8 weeks later. And that plea is not guilty. So we knew at that point we are going to trial with him at some stage in 2019.
And as the case is prepared for trial, potential witnesses are called in by the police and prosecution.
The police called me saying, we want to talk to you about your friend Kirill, and I thought they were calling me to say that he was dead. They told me he's been arrested, he's killed someone. I was in shock. I was like, are you sure that it is the right person? And they said, yes. You don't murder, you don't think that you knew a murderer?
Kirill Belarusov has been charged with the murder of his ex-partner, Laureline Garcia-Berteau. The trial begins at the Old Bailey in London, and the prosecution open their case against Kirill with DNA evidence from the crime scene.
The flex that was used to tie Laureline's hands behind her back, you could see that flex on the floor in the living room where it had been cut. And indeed, the forensic testing showed that Kirill Belarusov's DNA was at the cut part of that flex.
The jury hears of the early relationship between Laureline.
He came to spend a few days with Laureline at my home. He ate at my parents' table. He was a superman. A good boy.
And Kirill had even boasted of his career achievements to Laureline.
He had told people he was a stuntman and that he'd worked on films with famous people like Brad Pitt, and that he was training people. We searched in the industries at Hollywood, and we searched in the UK, IMDb, to see where was he in these films. And they're always shown if you work on there. He was nowhere to be found. These were all complete and utter lies that he told everybody.
But the lies did not stop there.
He began to say to lots of people that he was sick and that he had 10 years left to live.
He didn't talk much about his cancer. You would ask him questions and he would say, I'm bleeding from every hole. I've been puking for the last 3 days. I think it's just once where I said, if you don't mind me asking, what is the cancer? Where is it? And he said, oh, it's the pancreas, it's the liver area. And then the time after he would be like, oh, it's spread everywhere. But he would never give any more details. He'd just say, I'm a guinea pig. They've opened me up and stitched me. They keep on opening me up. But he wasn't very specific.
Laureline's mother, friend, and I found it very strange because he has nothing in front of us. When we saw Kirill, a wedding day or for a holiday, we can't imagine he's sick.
I've never known someone who had cancer. So when I saw him with the shaved head, I didn't question it. I didn't think he still had eyebrows. And I didn't know that you lose your eyebrows when you have chemo.
We were suspicious about the lies. It's big lies, you know. We were suspicious. We tell that to Laureline. We explained to her to open her eyes, but she was in love.
And we were discovering that almost all of his entire life that he told people about was a complete lie. Saying you've got cancer when you don't have, for me, is the lowest of the low.
The prosecution also reveals to the court more about Kirill's double life.
Every time he suggested he was going in for treatment to a hospital in London or just outside of London, what he was actually doing was going to stay with another girlfriend in London. That girlfriend also was told the same lie by him, that he had cancer. So when he was not with her and saying that he was away for a few days, he was going to stay with Laureline.
It's only when I sat down in court that I realized that he was texting the three of us at the same time, his girlfriend, Laureline, and me. So it was really like juggling between the three of us. With me, he was supposed to be in Russia having treatment, and then he was actually in London seeing Laureline, talking to Laureline. I felt like a fool. I felt so stupid. It was so shocking.
The prosecution described that as Loreline's film career began to take off, Kirill may have looked towards her with envy.
He wanted a career in films as well, to a certain extent. He wanted to be a stuntman. But he wasn't, and he couldn't have been because he didn't have the skills to do that. His only skill was lying, whereas she was genuinely talented, and she was very, very hardworking, and she was prepared to earn her place in her chosen career. So I think there probably was an element of jealousy in the relationship.
But it's details of a debt owed to Loreline which could point towards a motive for murder.
She had given him so much money over the course of their relationship, and we knew you were talking plus £17,000 at least at that point. And that was getting to the point where he had to pay that money back. In November 2018, Laureline had sent a message to Kirill, and this was saying, "You don't realise how much in debt, how much in trouble I am. I can't pay my rent. You need to pay me the money back." And from friends and family, we would always hear stories where he would promise this money. "It's coming, I've got this job, this stuntman job," whatever it might be, which was all lies. So he knew he could never pay that back. That could be one motive. Secondly, she was at that point in her life now where she was ready to move on, away from him. And she was effectively a source of income for him as well. And that was about to dry up.
To the court's surprise, Kirill gives evidence.
I think the most shocking about the trial was himself. He took the stand and spoke, and it was just, I think it lasted 2 days, and it was 2 days of horror. Every word that was coming out of his mouth was horrible. The way he talked about me, the way he talked about Laureline, the way he saw himself, the arrogance in his voice. I remember sitting down terrified because I had been so close to him and just thinking, that man is a monster. It was traumatizing.
I always think about the people over the years that have been in front of you in a trial, and he's probably right up there as the most evil looking eyes I think I've ever seen. And because behind it you can see that he really doesn't care. You know, his image and what he's portrayed himself as is more important than anything else. And he was really, really unpleasant and arrogant beyond belief during the entire 4-week trial at the Old Bailey.
The court hears how in March 2019, Laureline begged Kirill one last time to pay back what was owed to her. But instead, he used this opportunity to kill Laureline.
You have the timeline of them going out on the Friday night, which we can see. We have the timeline of them going shopping on Saturday morning. She had booked a removal company ready for Saturday, but she didn't know where she was moving to because Kirill Belarusov had said he has found somewhere for her to move to. She had no money because he owed her a lot of money. She kept asking him, "Where am I going?" And you could see that through telephone contact. "Well, where is this address? I need to tell my removal company where we're going." And so the removal company basically said, "Well, I can't move you to nowhere." So it was all cancelled. Kirill Belarusov comes up with a new lie. He's organised a removal company for her.
But the removal company never came.
And you get to the point then where Laureline is panicking because she doesn't know where she's going, and she's clearly getting to that point in the evening where on that Saturday she's starting to disbelieve what he's saying. And that's when everything goes quiet.
It's at this point that Kirill strangled Laureline with a cord. And the following morning, he was seen in local shops purchasing suspicious items.
Kirill had been out and bought these items on the Sunday morning, which were used to cover the body of Laureline.
After returning to Loreline's home to bury her body, Kirill used her phone to send fake texts to Loreline's friends and family to buy some time.
He foolishly used Google Translate to try and reply to the family members in French, and obviously it's not going to sound very credible. It's not going to sound like Laureline, not the words that she would use, and the translation was extremely clunky, so it was immediately quite suspicious.
And at the time that those messages were being sent, he was using the Wi-Fi of the address itself. So that puts him inside the address using her phone, sickeningly looking at pornography at the same time he's sending these messages, knowing full well that in that house is Laureline's body. And that really shows you what kind of person he is. It's very difficult to comprehend a person who has that kind of personality, that very strange and almost psychotic personality.
By the time concerned family and friends of Laureline get in touch with Kirill about her disappearance, he's leaving the country for Estonia.
I put my phone with video with him. I saw that he was in the airport. So I asked him, "You are in the airport, and your lovely Laureline is missing. Why are you leaving?" He has no explanation, but he leaves.
After a grueling trial at the Old Bailey, the jury returns its verdict. Kirill Belarusov is found guilty of murder and is sentenced to 24 years in prison.
About the verdict, we can't say that we are happy because our friend will never come again. But we are grateful for the jury and the judge to having seen him the real way he is and to not allow him to do that again to another woman.
But even with Laureline's killer behind bars, the impact of his crimes are long-lasting.
Today, we are more mistrusting. Today, when my friend meets a man, I want to know everything. I want to know where she is, the address. It changed all of our lives.
This entire story definitely had an effect on me. He destroyed so many lives, not just Laureline's. So many people that have been touched by his lies, so many people that believed he was such a nice person. And I think we were all a bit destroyed because we were all fooled and none of us saw anything. And if just one of us saw something, she could still be alive.